Democrats are scrambling to appeal to early black voters, a constituency the party will need to rely on when it comes to squeaking out a win for President Biden in 2024. One Democratic strategist told The Hill, quote, "The barrier here is not how do we make them like Biden. The barrier here is how do we convince them that government works."
President Biden continues to laud his administration's achievements for the black community, but Fox polling from 2020 and 2023 shows his popularity among these voters plummeting, while Donald Trump has seen a substantial boost. Here to discuss further is co-host of Revolutionary Blackout Network and host of the Savvy Saps podcast, Sabrina Salvati. Welcome, Sabrina.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. So do you buy, the administration's claims that everybody, including everybody in the black community, should just be all fine and dandy with how things have turned out?
I do not. I think that I have heard more from black people that they're not willing to just cave over and vote for the Democratic Party this time around. I think that poll is very telling. This is the first time, at least since I've been eligible to vote, where I've seen 20% support from African Americans for a Republican presidential candidate. So Donald Trump's support among African Americans has actually increased compared to where it was in 2020. And I think the Democratic Party should be very concerned about this. I think this idea that Donald Trump is scary, and I'm just not convinced that message about Donald Trump is going to work with black voters this time around in 2024 the way that it did in 2020. And I say this because during 2020, that was a chance when we were like, well, we could have a Biden presidency and it could be different compared to how it was with Donald Trump. Well, now we've had both. We've had a Biden presidency and we've had a Trump presidency. And a lot of African American voters feel that economically their life has not improved and it's actually become worse under Joe Biden presidency. So I think that the Democratic Party should be very concerned because they cannot win without African American support. And this could turn the page, I think, in reference to, we look at electoral politics and where people stand, African Americans stand in reference to the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. So we could see a change here.
Yeah, I mean, it feels a little like Joe Biden is the victim of his own 2020 rhetoric, where he was very explicit about how much he needed the black vote to win not just the presidency, but the Senate in Georgia, and made very specific and targeted politics to both people in Georgia and to black Americans on the whole, including setting a one-year deadline for himself to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which, of course, we're now blown, 2 years past that deadline, 2.5 years past that initial deadline he set for himself. Obviously, canceling student debt is not something that happened, but people tend to forget that he specifically said he would cancel all student debt for graduates of HBCUs. We have not seen that. Instead, we see an HBCU being targeted earlier this week, where black students in particular, were targeted to be victims of hate crimes only because that shooter was not let in Jacksonville. Did that not end up being the case? We obviously had the whole rigmarole over the amount that was promised in the checks that didn't come to fruition. And in the backdrop of all of that, I'm seeing a new stat showing that only 2% of black millennials make over $100,000 a year. Now, obviously, $100,000 is twice as much as the American average, but those are also very small numbers compared to other groups. So what do you think that Biden might have to show? Is it possible for him to show anything to the black community at that point that would give them confidence that he's able and willing to follow through on whatever campaign promises he makes this time around?
I'm not sure that any changes that he makes right now would actually change people's minds, for the people who said that 20%, for example, that said that they support Donald Trump. And the reason why I say that is because this isn't just about Joe Biden. This goes back to other Democrat presidents that have not fulfilled their promises and have not tried to help the black community. That includes Barack Obama, who was a big disappointment for a lot of African Americans in this country in reference to where he stood with helping people in the black community. Joe Biden really doesn't have a black agenda. And I think that's important for people to understand. It's one thing when you're running for president, you make these promises and then you don't fulfill them. And the Democratic Party, for a long time, they have pandered to the black community. When black people are asking for certain policies to be passed, they say the right rhetoric when they're running their campaigns, but once they're elected, They ignore the Black community. In fact, I feel like we're the only group where the Democratic Party actually panders this much to, and they just don't fulfill these promises. So it was only a matter of time that eventually Black people are going to look at both parties, and I think they should look at every party and independent candidates as well and say, is this really working for us? So I think going forward, it may be a little bit too late for a Biden presidency, because we saw this with Joe Biden, we saw it with Barack Obama, we saw this with Bill Clinton. How much longer are Black people supposed to wait to get some type of concessions from the Democratic Party?
Well, now President Biden is facing another online dragging for suggesting that he convinced Strom Thurmond to vote for the Civil Rights Act of 1963. Let's watch.
But pause for just a moment. I thought things had changed. I was able to literally, not figuratively, talk Strom Thurmond into voting for the Civil Rights Act before he died. And I thought, well, maybe there's real progress. But hate never dies. It just hides. It hides under the rocks.
Just a few problems there. Strom Thurmond did not vote yes for the Civil Rights Amendment. Biden didn't become a senator until 1973. Is this, he has these gaffes sometimes, remembering things that didn't happen or in vastly different circumstances than they did. Is this passing muster? Are people, believing the claims he's making about his own, history in crafting civil rights legislation?
Single-handedly freeing Nelson Mandela from jail. What's next?
He declared the Emancipation Proclamation, I think.
Did you know that Joe Biden actually delivered me as a baby?
Oh, that was nice of him. It's funny. There's this funny Twitter account that's photoshops Trump very convincingly in all these old photos. They go, oh, that was Trump with George Washington at the Battle of whatever. This is like kind of Biden's equivalent of that. He should get a meme team together to bear out some of these claims.
But I think this is the reason why some people are more, attracted to a Donald Trump for president than Joe Biden. This is what I've heard from people, because they feel like Trump is more real. He's more raw, which is not something that the establishment from either party actually wants revealed. One of the things that I've noticed, the fact that Donald Trump, his support continues to increase every time he receives another indictment. And also, particularly with African-American voters, they're starting to see through this. They're like, how many times are they going to try to come after this guy? There's also the issue of the police purposely targeting people to try to take them down. That really does resonate with a lot of African-American voters. So I think these indictments actually, instead of hurting Donald Trump, they're actually helping Donald Trump. And I think that's something that the Democratic Party really needs to understand. I think they thought that this would work in their favor, but it's not working in their favor. If you look at Donald Trump's poll numbers, he was much lower before the indictment started, and now he just continues to increase and increase. And I've seen multiple videos, and I've talked to multiple people who are African American that said this time around they will support Donald Trump. And so this is what happens when the Democratic Party tries to rely on the Republican Party is so bad, so vote for us. Eventually, you're going to run out of steam with that message. If you're not delivering something for the people will eventually turn away.
Sabby, do you think that either Donald Trump or Joe Biden have an agenda for working class and poor people in this country?
Not really. I think that people, in my opinion, I think that people should leave both parties. I think that they're both corporate and they support their donors. They support Wall Street and the military industrial complex. And as long as you have those two items hanging over both of those parties, it's going to be really hard for things to change for working class people. But that being said, what I've seen, it seems like particularly in the Democratic Party, even those politicians that said they would fight for those issues for working class people, once Democrat leadership says the opposite, they go in line with the Democrat leadership. So that's a big part of the problem. Whereas in the Republican Party, there are people that are willing to push back on Republican leadership. And we've seen that display during the Kevin McCarthy speakership. So I think that is a little bit of a difference there. But at the end of the day, they're both corporate. So we have to find a way to break away from corporate money and electoral politics if we want to see real substantial change.
Sabrina, thank you so much for joining us. And we'll have more Rising right after this.
Thank you.